So Dad, what are property titles and why do I need to know this?
There are different types of titles when you do buy a property. So the title is what you actually own on that property. So when you're buying a house, that house is on a title.
Yeah.
And that becomes what you own. But there are different types of titles, which are Torrens title, community title, and strata title. So they're the main three types of titles. So
I've heard of them.
the type of title it affects your responsibility and what you can change in that property as well.
So you mentioned Torrens title. What is that?
So the Torrens title is the most common title in Australia. So what this means is that you own the building and you own the land. This is typically used for standalone houses and sometimes townhouses as well.
So what are the pros and cons about a Torrens title?
The pros are that you have full ownership, full responsibility, and also full control over what happens with that title, subject to council approvals. For example, you can paint that house almost whatever colour you want. You can change the internals of that house however you like. You can do whatever landscape you want to the outside. So you're in control of that title, subject to council parameters.
And what are some cons?
So some cons are that there are high maintenance costs. For example, if you own that house by yourself, you own that roof by yourself. If there was a leak, you're responsible for that. But if you own a block of units and it's got a roof leak and it's say 5 groups of units, you can share that cost between 5 people. So there are high maintenance costs potentially. The other cons are that you're responsible for everything on that title as well. So whether it's your front fence or whether it's a tree, you're responsible for that tree and that land. Whereas community or strata, you're not responsible for those things there.
All right, what about strata titles?
So strata titles are normally used for apartments, units, some townhouses as well, where there's a common land area. So it's not, so you only own the building part.
So group things.
So group dwellings. So think of a 5-story building with apartments. There might be, say, 4 apartments per level. The internal of that building is your responsibility. The external of that building and any common areas, for example, there might be a roof deck or there might be a common garden area, is part of the strata, and that's the strata's responsibility.
And there's strata fees.
And there's also strata fees to maintain that as well. Like in Darwin, where we stay in the apartment recently, that property is on a strata title. So they've got strata fees to cover the gym, to cover the pool, to cover the maintenance of the car park. So their strata fees to cover the lift. So anything that's your title is that property where you live, where you stay, but anything outside of that is the responsibility of the group, which is the strata,
and a fee you have
and the
to
fees
pay.
to cover that. And things like building insurance is one insurance company would insure the building, but that insurance fee is divided by all the properties, so that becomes part of your strata fees as well.
So how much do all these fees cost?
They can start quite low, but they also can go quite high. It depends on the type of property that you own. So it might be a complex with very basic amenities, very small common areas, so with no lift. So the common areas might be quite low with low maintenance costs. So the strata fees actually might be quite low to have that property. Whereas you might have another property which is a multi-story apartment building with pools, with gyms, with car parks, with all the extra amenities that need to be maintained. That maintenance cost needs to be covered by everyone. So that's where those strata fees will be higher.
So does a strata fee get added to the purchase price of the property or is it a separate payment?
No, it's a strata fee gets paid normally every quarter.
Okay.
Yeah, just on strata fees as well, when you are buying a strata property, that fee normally gets, you know how we talked in the previous episode about HEMS and living expenses? Strata fees normally sits above HEMS. So if that strata fee is $2,000 a quarter,
so your
that would reduce your
lowers.
borrowing capacity, yes.
What else do I need to know about the cost with strata?
Yeah, there's one part of strata fee which you need to be aware of, and especially when you're buying a property, you need to make sure there is some type of sinking fund and some funds available, because if you're buying an older apartment block, generally what should happen is there should be a sinking fund which everyone's been paying over the last 10 years, for example, where money is accumulated to cover any maintenance of that building, which might be painting the whole building, or it might be repairing timber windows, or it might be anything that requires maintenance on an old building. There should be a sinking fund where money goes towards to cover those costs. If you're buying an older property and there's no sinking fund, what they can do is raise a special levy. So let's say you buy this property and let's just say everyone votes and they decide to paint the building. and that building cost might be $20,000 between 20 units. They'll raise a special levy of $1,000 to cover the cost of that painting of that building, as opposed because there was no sinking fund. So check strata fees and see if there is a sinking fund, and also check there has been some accumulation of the sinking fund.
So what are some pros and cons?
Now, the pros are strata properties are normally cheaper than Torrens title properties because of the strata fees. There's also another advantage is common areas are maintained for you, so you're not responsible for maintaining common areas. So they're generally suitable for buyers that are looking for low maintenance properties. The cons are the fees can sometimes be quite expensive to cover the general maintenance of the building and the amenities, so they can actually be quite high.
But that would only depend on what type of amenities the group has.
So if you're buying it, if you don't, for example, go to the gym, or you don't like swimming, and you're buying in a complex that's got a swimming pool and a gym, you're paying for someone else to use those amenities. So they're the things you've got to consider when you are buying a strata property. The other thing to be aware of is that you have less control over that property. Some strata titles don't allow you to have pets in the building. You can't change the front colour of your building, for example. Like if it's a strata title, you're limited as to what you can do with the outside of that building. You pretty much can't do anything.
Because you don't have full entity ownership.
You only own the internals of that building. Yep.
So what about community titles? I know it sounds pretty similar to strata fees, but what is that?
So community titles generally a land division with a common road where it might be to say common driveway. Let's think of say a group of 9 dwellings in a row with a driveway.
Yeah.
That driveway is a common driveway, but each house has got its own community title. So that title you still own the land for that title.
So it's kind of the best of both
and
worlds.
The backyard is yours, but it is a community title, and there are also restrictions on what you can do in that on the facade of that building too. So you can't go, for example, and change your front door colour to yellow because there'll be laws written that you can't change the colours, and there's community bylaws. But community title is basically you own the title. There is land that you also own. You also own the outside of that building, and you're responsible for that building. But there is a common driveway or a common area that you share. It could even be a common barbecue area, a common driveway, but there is some type of common land which is involved with that property. And it's generally where you're buying a block of units where you don't have street frontage to a main road and it's a common driveway.
So based on what you've just told me, I don't think I would want to buy a strata property because I want to do what I want to do with the property, not just to the internals, but also to the externals.
Yeah, fair enough, Nicola.
What do you think about
I tend to agree, but some strata titles or properties do have some benefits though. So if you want to live in the city and you want to live in an apartment, it's pretty much your only option. So it comes back to your wants, your needs and your wants. So if you need to live in the CBD, you're probably limited on property. You're probably going to have to get a strata title unit. So again, it comes back to your needs, but then be careful when you do buy a strata title unit and make sure that the fees are reasonable. You're not paying for things that you're not going to be using, like a pool or like a sauna, a spa, gym. So make sure that if you are paying the strata fees, so sometimes there are benefits. So you might want a house with a pool, but you can't afford it, but you might buy a strata unit with a pool and pay some minimal fees. I wouldn't write off strata completely. I'd look at it individually. So there are some strata properties that have minimal ongoing costs, minimal strata fees, as low as $300 to $500 a quarter. And you are going to still be paying building insurance if you were to buy Torrens title property. So that strata fee that you're paying
already includes
a building insurance. So, but in saying that, there are also other strata properties where you might be paying $2,500 a quarter, which you probably don't want to be doing. That is quite a significant amount of fees that you're going to be outlaying to live in that property. So I wouldn't rule it out, but just what it is important is to be aware of what you are paying for.
And look for lower strata fees.
Correct.
Well, thanks, Dad. This has been really good to understand the different types of titles when buying a property. I know this is not the most exciting episode, but at least now we all know the difference between Torrens, strata, and community titles. I'm Nicola Kef. See you in the next episode.